Good afternoon, Emily. How are you today?
Good. Thanks. How about you?
I'm good, thanks. Tell us your name and the kind of career that you've chosen to follow.
So I'm Emily Podhradsky. I'm an archaeologist and a program coordinator.
Okay, how are you an archaeologist, which in my mind is out digging in the dirt, and a program coordinator, which seems very different.
Yes, and as a aside, I also work from home. So
So you dig
um,
in your living room?
yes. No. So right now, um, I write, and this segues into your next question, cultural resource risk assessments, essentially. Um, as part of an environmental consulting process. So what that means essentially is I am an archaeologist. I do have experience out in the field digging, but I work for the private sector. And as for the environmental consulting firm, we contract with different industries. Right now, the company I'm working for is a subcontractor for oil and gas company, um, and so they're doing a couple different things. The big project that I'm working as a coordinator for is vegetation management. And so you think about the wildfires. I'm in California, and the it's PG&E is our big what do you call it? What to call it? Our big client right now. You hear a lot about wildfires, and so they're in the process of moving some of their electric lines underground.
I see.
They're also doing routine maintenance to the lines. So they're out there cutting trees, removing trees, different sorts of vegetations away from the lines. And so as part of all of that work, you have to go through environmental permitting process, and archaeology falls within that scope. Um, and so when I say I'm doing risk assessments, before again, before they do any of that work, the tree removals, major trenching to move those lines underground, we look at the history and the archaeology and the tribal involvements in those areas. And we make sure that there's nothing that will be impacted if there's anything there. Um, and or if there has not been any work done in that area and we have to send somebody out into the field to actually do a survey and to look at the basically get out there and see and see what's there. It's kind of interesting, just as an aside, because a lot of these electric and transmission distribution lines, they're actually considered historic themselves because they were
Oh,
put in like the
right.
early 1900s.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we do a lot of work on in the national parks and the U.S. Forest Service because, like, if you think about, you need those electric lines all over, even in the remote areas. So there's a lot of just kind of isolated locations where it's not like you're driving by and on your way into your driveway and you see, oh, look at all these, fallen branches because of that windstorm. Like you don't know if there's nobody out there. So
All right, we're going to have to back up
sure.
because when you are talking about trenching and all of that sort of thing, and in my mind, I have archaeology, and in my
Mhm.
mind, archaeology is maybe not what you're talking about. Um, when you're trenching and you have to do an assessment, are you talking about like ancient burial grounds or What are you assessing? What are you trying to find?
We've actually done some burial grounds, more common than you would expect, actually. So archaeology is the study of humankind, essentially looking at past remains. So a
Right.
lot of people get it mixed up with paleontology, and we actually do have paleontologists that work for us too that look for dinosaur, that type of stuff, bones. But the things that we're looking for as archaeologists are specific to humans. So we're looking for historics out here in California, big gold rush area. So different buildings, different mining areas. There's these really interesting like company towns in certain areas where, a mine came in and so they put in like, little villages, different housing. And just like anywhere else, it's not always sustainable in the long term. And so it gets kind of abandoned and left. And sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Historic stuff, yes. There's also a lot of tribal involvement, and that falls within the archaeologist to coordinate. So um, different areas of the United States have different degrees of tribal involvement. I've worked in Ohio that didn't have a large component. Out here in California, there's a lot of active tribes that manage their own resources, um, depending on, different ages. That type of information is often passed through generations, and they're out there managing their land themselves. So if a project is going through a tribal area that has um, important significance to them, we coordinate with them to make sure that we're out there protecting anything that might be there, documenting it, and doing it in a way that is respectful and um, works for that tribe. So we might
Yeah.
not get your
So you're
information.
actually
Yeah.
protecting the remain, the remnants of those previous cultures.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily for the safety necessarily of the crew, say an old mine or something, but it's actually for the preservation of the past. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yes, yes, that's perfect. That's a great way to say that.
So, how do you become an archaeologist? What do you have to do?
So at the very basic, um, you want to get a degree, bachelor's in anthropology, and you'll note that it's anthropology, it's not archaeology. Um, from there, um, you can go on and get a master's degree. That is probably the most common and the most recommended, is to go for a master's in anthropology. Um, I've also worked with a lot of people that have PhDs. I just have a bachelor's. To work in archaeology, you also typically will need to have a field school. So you're actually going out there and getting um, that experience, usually more geared to, say, a university research setting versus me being in the private industry.
Are there a lot of jobs for archaeologists?
Um, I will say yes and no. There's more jobs than you realize there are, but in the grand scheme of things, it can be a pretty competitive and challenging career field to get into.
I can think people would be like, "Oh, I want to go dig up a pyramid or mummy or something like that." I can't imagine there are a lot of those jobs out there. Although I think they just discovered something in Italy that's remarkably new. And I'm guessing there are those sorts of things. But as a whole, I don't know. I always wanted to go into anthropology and archaeology, so I'm really
Yeah.
interested personally. Um, so you would recommend, well, how does someone find out if they would actually like this field? Are there any kind of precursory things they could do to find out whether this is a good fit for them? Or do you have to go in and do all the schooling and then get to the field and say, okay, this is not what I thought it was? How do
You
you know?
don't. There's different ways that you can volunteer. That's what I did. And that I think is, I mean, it's relevant in any career field is to find somebody that does it and reach out and see if you can shadow them or see if there's volunteer, or talk to them, that sort of thing. And that is the best way I would say.
How can you volunteer? Where did you volunteer, for example?
So it it's kind of a long story. Originally, I got a degree in education. Realized I didn't like that. And so I've always been interested in social sciences, anthropology. And so I ended up going back to school and got a degree in anthropology and focused on archaeology. And then I worked in healthcare administration for close to 10 years before I actually got those opportunities to kind of see if I wanted to really do it. Because again, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of job opportunities and it's really competitive. So I ended up finding out that there is a nonprofit organization near where I grew up in New York State, and they're entirely volunteer based. And I spent a week or two with them one summer, just volunteering. I had already gotten my degree in anthropology at that point. I had not had the opportunity to take an official field school just because I was going back to school and, had other things to do during the summer and had to find a job that paid me money. So,
Yes.
so it just kind of went on hold. And then that kind of gave me enough insight to say, yes, I really do want to do this. But it wasn't until another year went by that I found it was a temporary job, because that's what a lot of jobs in archaeology start out as temporary.
Hmm.
And so I spent about a month in Minnesota. I actually took a leave of absence from my actual job and just went up there and worked on that project for about a month. And then I think it was 2 years after that is when I finally like officially switched full time into archaeology. And it wasn't until another year and a half, almost 2 years later, that I finally got a full time job that paid me benefits. And um, so it's important to know that you really want to do it before you do it. But it's also, I think, just equally important to listen to yourself. If you just can't get it out of your head, oh, I want to do this, so I want to do this, to actually just, do it.
So is it um, unstable to have a job in the archaeology field if the projects are short term? Like, how do you plan a career if you're constantly looking for the next job?
It's challenging, and it's those, I think the early years of your career are those points that you're going to be kind of hopping from project to project.
Mhm.
Um, for the most part, there are people that do that long term, and it's kind of a lifestyle that it works for some people.
Yeah,
You're
probably.
constantly traveling.
And exciting because it's always
Yeah.
different.
And you get to meet different people. It's a very small field, so there's you work with somebody, you're probably going to see them again. And so as long as you're able to prove that you're a good worker and are reliable, you'll be able to kind of piece all those little temporary jobs. Sometimes you're lucky and you find a project that could be a year or two or longer, or you might work for a couple different companies as a seasonal employee, and as they need somebody to go do field work, they'll call you, and maybe another company will be able to get you, and you can kind of alternate projects. But it can be very difficult.
But hang in there. if
Yeah.
that's what you love, right?
Yep. Exactly. As long as you
Yeah.
can tolerate it. I once I got officially into it in 2017. It was a temporary job in North Dakota. I was up there for about 6 months. They wanted to keep me on, but I found a permanent position in Texas, and so I moved sight unseen. Technically, I was still living in Ohio and Cleveland at the time, but I was living out of a hotel in North Dakota, and I ended up um, driving back through all the way to Ohio and then all the way down to Texas. And I loved the job in Texas. It was stable. There were benefits, like vacation time. They helped me relocate. Great, great company, great mentors. But that lifestyle I had a really difficult time with because even though I was full time, I was still constantly in a hotel. I'd come home on the weekends, but it got to be too much by that point, and so um, I ended up moving back to Ohio, and eventually we came out here to California. And right now I work with two different companies, both full time, both like permanent benefits, what you would think of as the standard actual career. So I've made it, if you want to say that, but it's worth it. It's worth it as if that's what you really want to do.
Very good. Very good. Any advice that you want to offer that we haven't covered?
Um, y yes. And I mentioned just, it's worth just sticking with it if that's what you really want to do, but also something that took me a really long time to believe and actually like fully grasp is, I get all these advice from different people in different fields and different industries, and they'd say, oh, just follow your interests and it'll all work out. And that's really difficult when you're actually like living through those really challenging, confusing times in your life. And, it really is true that like your career path isn't linear. And there's all these different things that you're going to get into. And, you just keep trying to focus on those aspects that you like, and it really will turn out.
You just have to keep
You
going,
keep
right?
going, keep going back and questioning, is this the right place for me? Is this what I want to
Right,
be doing? How do I want to be spending my time?
right.
Um, does it work for the lifestyle I want?
Emily, this was really cool. I enjoyed talking to you. If someone sees this video and is interested in communicating with you through our website, maybe to ask questions about living in those hotels and running around or digging somewhere for the benefit of those ancient cultures and peoples, can they contact you?
Yes, absolutely.
We would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time. It was fascinating.
Thanks.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.